With a new dawn come new challenges, and with it more work for Dumpy and his mate Jan. The pair of them have been very useful making these garden beds for the trouble and strife and getting all that finished off, moving the materials we need, and this job was completed under the watchful eye of the blue-tongued skink that lives in the creek. We also moved some rocks and materials and compacted down some backfill to make a nice flat pad for the new hen Hilton because Mr. Water Dragon was stealing the eggs. Since we've done that, the hens seem very happy in the new hen Hilton and their eggs aren't getting stolen anymore. The old chuck pen, however, had a fight with Jan and it may have lost. Oops. It was all going really well until disaster struck. This coupling here failed, resulting in this crack here. The other side of the gearbox was even worse, and I don't think we're going to need an arrow to show you where the crack is on this bit. But anyway, you'd think that all we need to do is go and get ourselves a new gearbox casing and everything will be right in the world. Easy as, you'd think, but sadly not. So it all had to come out. The body panels came off, the engine and box came out, the box got separated, I stripped the box on the bench, and when I was getting the last of the oil out, I found these needle bearings and some other swarf in the oil. That didn't look good, and we needed to figure out what was going on there. Also as well, on the end of this spline shaft here, there's a final drive pinion, and to get that off I've locked, you can see there the selectors, I've selected 2 gears to lock the gearbox so I can undo this bolt here. But in doing that, I did make mincemeat out of a ring spanner and a 3/8 square drive. Anyway, I stripped the gearbox down, got all the parts sorted out and boxed them all up so I knew what was what, and then that gave me the chance to actually have a look at how badly cracked the gearbox was. And I was quite surprised. This crack here actually extends all the way around almost to the bottom of the box in the centre, and you can actually see just by my finger there, just there, that's where the crack ends. The crack on the other side that I thought was quite small actually comes through this boss, through here, through the bearing for the lay shaft, pops out the other side. If you can just refocus, there we are, and then you can see the crack carries on down through the casing all the way down to here. So if you look at where the 2 cracks are, we've got one there and one there. The gap between them is about the width of my finger. So believe it or not, I almost snapped the end of the gearbox off clean. I've got the output reduction gear here and the ring gear, and I'll speak to you about them later on because that caught me out later on. There was something I didn't notice. These are all the bits I found in the oil, and they had to belong somewhere, of course. So where did they belong? Well, there's a needle roller bearing that fits between the input shaft and the main shaft in here. And given that this is the condition of the bearing casing and that there's no rollers in there, I'm assuming that that's where all the parts came from. So yeah, I've boxed everything up, I've got my output for pinion gear and everything else all sorted out, and there's the old lay shaft and the old brass bearing that's worn. I need to get a new one of them because that fits on there, but it's like a prick in a shirt sleeve. I've got the output shaft gears there, I've got the reverse gear pinion and the bearing that sits on. They're all in fairly good condition. My selectors are okay. So we just need to figure out what bits we need and get them ordered. So here's a slightly better shot of that bearing, but I did manage to get a new casing. Darren at Mead Plant sent me a casing all the way to Australia, but you might want to play spot the difference with me here. So there's some threaded holes next to these bearing holes here, and they're used to secure features which retain the bearing so that they can't fall out into the reduction gear housing if you have that. The standard gearbox doesn't, and that's why they're not there. There's also these 4 dowel holes that I need to orientate the position of the output gear housing, and that caught me out. I'll tell you a bit more about that later on. Finally, the last thing that's missing is this hole here, and that allows oil to run freely between the gearbox and the output gear, reduction gear housing so that the gears can be properly lubricated. So I took the gearbox casing to my mate Dom at Sunshine Coast Makerspace, and he very kindly machined the correct holes and threaded them for me, and then when I got it back it just needed to be cleaned a little bit so that I could get it ready for reassembly. So I'm getting into the reassembly now, and I've got the lay shaft in place with the new brass bearing. That lay shaft now sits really nice. There's no side to side playing it anymore, and it runs real smooth. The gear sets have all gone back in quite nicely, and they've been oiled and they run really nice. Even the reverse gear set runs really nice. You can see as well I've got the selector to line up quite nicely, and I've positioned the changeover gate on the threaded adjustment properly. This side of town, we've got the selector shaft in. There's still a gap there for the other selector shaft. We've got the output bearing in place, the reverse idler and the lay shaft bearing. You can see the features there that we had to get put in for the retaining of the bearings. Then on top of that as well, this is the old main shaft here. And then if I just grab the input shaft, you can see I've just pressed the new input roller bearing, needle bearing into there. But guess what? Bloody doesn't fit, does it? So there's a problem. On closer inspection, I noticed that there's a little bit of a dip in there, and then if you look at the end, you can see there's like a sleeve or a collar on the end of the shaft. Turns out that that shouldn't be there. Also, as we inspect the shaft, you can see that in here it looks like it's been repaired. It looks like it's been welded or built up with weld and reground or refinished, and that really wasn't sitting too pretty with me. I wasn't mad keen about that. So with that, I went back to Darren at Mead Plant and asked him to find me a spare main shaft, and he duly did and sent me one in the post. While I'm waiting for that, I can get on with doing some other things. So before this shaft comes, and I have to join it to that shaft and put it back in here, I thought that this would make a jolly handy clutch aligning tool. So I've just put the new spigot bearing in there so that we can use that to line the clutch up nicely. And this is the old clutch plate, and courtesy of our friends at Winget, we've got this to go in. New clutch plate. So I'm just going to do that. Get the clutch back on. Then we can have a look at the bearings on that shaft and get new release bearing. Put the bell housing and everything. Or get it ready to go back on. So I'm going to bolt it back onto the gearbox before I can put it back on. But I can at least get these bits done and get that on. So that's my next job. So this is the new clutch friction plate from Winget, genuine Borg and Beck, and you've got to like it when a manufacturer is clever enough to help numpties like me. Right, I've just got to torque the bolts up, but I have used the input shaft as the aligning tool, and what it means is that we now have a very nicely aligned clutch. So hopefully that will make it easy to put the gearbox back on. Alright, so we've got the input shaft in and done and dusted, and we've got the spacer and the circlip. That's all okay. Now we've got to put this over the end, but there's a hole in here that comes out here. So oil comes from the top, splash fed into this well, comes through a little hole out here, This yeah. So the oil comes through there. Then it has to go into here, and it comes out of here, this little hole here, and then behind the oil seal here, if I can just move that, behind the oil seal here, it can go through this hole into the shaft, down the middle of the shaft, and pop out and lubricate the little roller bearing that was mashed up in there. So the bearing that's inside this on the end of that shaft gets lubricated. So we have to make sure that we line all of that up, and we also want to make sure there's no crap in it as well. So if we just give it a bit of that. So we're into gaskets now. The first gasket goes on the end of here. This one. Got to get that on there. It says I need nylon sealing washers for the bolts, but I haven't got them, so I'll probably just have to gob it up with some ultimate grey gasket sealant for high torque applications. I'm not sure what difference that makes, but we'll give it a shot. Making a bit more progress, but struggling with the gaskets a bit because I've brought the JB Weld and it's gone off in the tube. Excellent, I'll have to take that back. So that's proving a little bit of a challenge, but we've got the shaft on and we've got the bearing and the seal in there, and we've done all of that, and we've got the selectors in. Both of the selectors are in now. We're on to the output gear and a very mangled old tab washer, so got a new one. So I haven't got as far as fitting the cover yet, but I do want to test, and I thought the best way to do it would be to put the gear lever back in, and to do that I've got new spring, new clip. These are the bolts for putting the top on. I've got new boot and cover and that to go over the top of the gearbox. So I've also got these, I don't think these are meant to be drilled and tapped. When I took this apart, they were drilled and tapped and somebody had done that, but you're meant to have these little, where are they? They might be in the box still somewhere. Got these two little, there we go. So these two little wear pads in here, there's two of these. This is all the stuff for the clutch. They're the bearings to go into the bell housing. I haven't showed you anything on the bell housing yet, but I have been working on it while I've been waiting for parts to arrive. And there's a bearing floating around somewhere that's a bit embarrassing. But anyway, I'll show you that later. But yeah, I've got to get these two little things out of here. I don't know what to do because they're too big. These holes are too big now and they'll just float around. So I was toying with the idea of drilling them out and counter boring a bolt so that fits into the end of the bolt, and then adjusting it, making it so you can adjust it. But I'm going to have a ponder. So I seem to be making some progress now. I've got this end case on, and it'll actually fit 4 places. It's pegged with dowels in 4 places. And first time, and this is off centre as well. It's off centre. So I put it on the first time, and the output pinion was not mating with the internal ring. So I got no drive, and I couldn't work out what had gone wrong. So anyway, I've worked out that you've got to turn it and have it in the right position so that it meshes properly. So anyway, next thing to note, Winget. When I pulled this thing apart, I had these fibre washers on these things, but Winget sent me these. I've never seen anything like it. I just thought it'd have a fibre washer on it or something. But I've got these 2 metal crush washers with a rubber seal in them. Strange. Oh, a bit more progress then. So we've got the gearbox, we're all done, we've got everything's okay with the gearbox, and we've got the new clutch release bearing in, new springs, put new bearings in the shaft, new cotter pin, and you can't get to this grease nipple from the access point when it's on the machine, but you can get to this one. So what I did is I put a right angle grease nipple on there, so when it comes to servicing and lubricating I can actually do it. This is what the old bearing was like. it's worn completely through. So I'm glad I put new bearings in. So now I've got the bell housing back onto the gearbox. I've got the output attachment to the coupling with a couple of new bolts in it ready to go on. All the gaiters and that are in place, the proper ones now, not the old steering rack gaiter that we used to have before. So we'll get this onto the engine and then we can couple everything back together again. So on closer inspection it turned out the coupling itself hadn't actually failed. It's these two holes in the disc here, and I don't think they were ever actually meant to be mounted. I think they were clearance holes, so we're just going to put the coupling back together correctly now. I don't think it was ever correctly assembled if you look at the witness marks. Maybe once, but not while I've owned the machine. Well, we might have fast forwarded a little bit here. Yesterday I got the gearbox finished off and it was ready to connect back to the engine. Today I've connected the gearbox and the engine together, got the engine and gearbox back into the dumper. I've connected the coupling properly this time, so that's I don't think it was ever connected properly, but it's definitely connected properly this time. Put some grease on the mechanism for the parking brake. I'm just putting back all the panels now. I'm just putting all this back. Got to figure out how the gearbox cover and the engine cover all fit on. But yeah, I've been cracking on and the dinner's ready, so I've got to pull my finger out. I have connected all the clutch up and it works, and I have bled the injectors and start some runs. Figured out that one of the injectors was leaking and that's why the sump was filling up with diesel oil, so I've managed to fix that, so hopefully it'll be a little bit more economic now. Instead of using 2 thimblefuls an hour, hopefully it'll only use 1. But yeah, the second and third gear on the new shaft are a bit stiff, but first and reverse are good. The gearbox feels much better than it did previously. It's a lot nicer, and I've got the clutch. There's virtually no play in the clutch now. That's just playing the pin down there. But there's no play at the top end here. I've managed to get this grease nipple pointing in the right direction. That one's easy to get to, that's not a problem. But yeah, the clutch is loads better. The gears are feeling pretty good. Start some runs, no trouble. Fix the fuel leak. Fix the coupling properly. I think we might be on to something. Well, given that Dumpy's got all of his covers back on and is now around the side of the house, I think it's safe to say that he works. I've just given him a little bit of a thrash, and second and third aren't as tight as I thought. They're actually freeing up quite nicely, so I think it's going to be alright. They're a little bit tight still, but I'll definitely be able to make use of the machine again now, so I get a bit of a clip of him doing some work soon and finish the video off.